All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the deep dive. You guys really sent us down a rabbit hole this time with your request. You want to go deeper with Chief Keef, beyond the music. Yeah, we got this pretty wild script someone sent in titled Chief Keef, A Modern Prophet of Philosophy and Theology. Not your typical music analysis. So today we're going to dive in and see if we can unearth some of the philosophical and theological layers, maybe even unexpectedly woven into his music and persona.
Yeah, the script really makes you think about musicians in a different way, especially those whose art comes from really challenging environments like the South Side of Chicago. It's suggesting that Chief Keef's work might be a reflection of something deeper,
Yeah.
like a response to his surroundings that goes beyond just entertainment.
Yeah, it's like finding depth where you least expect it. And speaking of depth, this script introduces this concept of liberation theology, which I'll admit I had to kind of brush up on. It basically argues that faith and spirituality can be born out of the struggles of the oppressed, finding hope and meaning in the face of hardship.
Exactly. And that idea is so central to understanding Chief Keef's music. I mean, his lyrics are often raw and unfiltered, and they become like this powerful expression of this concept.
It's like finding light in the darkness.
Mm.
The script specifically calls out tracks like Love Sosa and I mean, these aren't just party anthems, right? It's describing them as like powerful declarations of existence,
Mhm.
of defiance, almost like anthems for those whose voices are often silenced.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that for many in these communities, even the simple act of surviving, that can be a form of resistance. Every moment of joy or success, it becomes even more significant, against a backdrop of constant struggle. It's like it adds these layers of meaning to even the simplest lyrics.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. The script takes a sharp turn. It starts exploring the philosophy behind drill music, the genre that Chief Keef is credited with pioneering. Now, drill music often gets a bad rap because of the themes of violence.
But what if we looked at it through a different lens? What if instead of just focusing on the surface, we considered drill music as a form of existential expression?
Existentialism,
Eh.
like Sartre and Camus, questioning the meaning of life and all that. I have to admit, this is not where I expected this deep dive to go.
Right. It might seem like a stretch, but think about Sartre's ideas. He emphasized this idea that true freedom comes from defining yourself in the face of external forces. Drill music, in its raw depiction of life's challenges, could be seen as an attempt to do just that, to create meaning and identity in a world that often feels chaotic and uncaring. It's about finding your own voice and making choices even when you're surrounded by chaos.
So it's not just about glorifying violence,
Yeah.
but about finding your own agency and expressing your reality, even if that reality is harsh. That's a really different way of thinking about it.
And the script takes it a step further. It connects drill music to Nietzsche's concept of creating values in a universe that doesn't inherently have any. It's as if Chief Keef, through his music, is saying we create our own meaning, our own sense of purpose, especially when the world around us seems indifferent.
Whoa, okay. So we've gone from liberation theology to existentialism to Nietzsche, all in the span of like a few minutes. This deep dive is already proving to be mind-blowing. But the script doesn't stop there, does it? This is where it takes perhaps the most unexpected turn. It suggests that Chief Keith can be viewed as a kind of prophet.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. It's a bold claim, right? But if we think about the archetype of the reluctant prophet, someone who doesn't necessarily set out to lead, but whose voice resonates with a generation because of its authenticity.
It kind of starts to make sense. I mean, Chief Keef wasn't trying to be a philosopher or the theologian. He's just expressing himself.
Yeah.
But that expression, because it was so raw and real, it connected with people on a deeper level.
Exactly. And the script highlights this fascinating paradox within his work, this idea of paradoxical humility.
Paradoxical humility. Okay, now you've really lost me.
It might sound contradictory, but think about it. On the surface, you have this bravado, the confidence, the larger-than-life persona. But underneath that, there are these glimpses of vulnerability, an awareness of life's fragility, even a sense of being burdened by fame.
So it's like even in his strength, there's an acknowledgement of weakness. That's pretty deep.
Right. And this actually echoes certain figures from religious and philosophical traditions. The script mentions Job from the Bible, who grapples with immense suffering, and Siddhartha from Buddhist philosophy, who confronts the impermanence of life. Both of them, despite their struggles, find a way to transcend their circumstances.
Wow. I never would have connected Chief Keef to those kinds of figures. You're making me rethink everything I thought I knew about his music.
That's the beauty of these deep dives. They force us to question our assumptions and make connections we might never have considered before. But we're just getting started. This script is packed with even more thought-provoking ideas, Ready to keep going.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what other surprises this deep dive has in store. Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit that first part left my head spinning a bit.
Yeah.
I knew there were so many layers to Chief Keef's music, but I'm ready for more. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've already touched on some pretty heavy philosophical concepts, but this script keeps going deeper. One thing that stood out to me was the idea that Chief Keef's work reflects like the absurdity of life.
Absurdism. You mean like the idea that life has no inherent meaning, that we're all just kind of making it up as we go along? I'm not sure I'm ready to go full nihilist just yet.
Hold on, hold on. Absurdism isn't quite nihilism. It's more about recognizing the tension between our deep desire for meaning and the fact that the universe doesn't seem to offer any easy answers. It's about embracing that contradiction, that inherent uncertainty, rather than trying to force meaning onto a world that might not have it.
Okay, starting to see where you're going with this. So how does Chief Keef fit into all of this?
Yeah.
His music isn't exactly known for being lighthearted or optimistic.
Exactly. Think about the way Chief Keef portrays life in his music. It's raw. It's often violent. It doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of his environment. But within that, there are these moments of joy, of defiance, of finding ways to celebrate even in the face of struggle. It's not about glorifying the negative, but acknowledging it as part of like the full spectrum of human experience.
So it's more about honesty than providing solutions. Like he's saying, this is the world as I see it, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Precisely. And in that honesty, there's a strange kind of freedom. It allows us to confront the absurdity of life head on, without trying to impose artificial meaning onto it. It's a different way of finding peace, not through answers, but through acceptance.
I never thought about it that way. But it makes sense. We spend so much time trying to make sense of the world, to find the right answers, the right paths. Maybe
Sure.
there's something liberating in simply acknowledging that it's all a bit absurd and embracing that absurdity.
The script also draws this really interesting parallel
Yep.
between Chief Keef's work and the concept of tragedy. In the classical sense,
Tragedy, like Shakespearean tragedies with doomed heroes and epic downfalls, I can kind of see it, but Chief Keef isn't exactly writing sonnets.
right. But think about the core elements of tragedy. You have a protagonist, often with great potential, who is ultimately brought down by fate, by circumstance, or even by their own flaws. It's a story about the human condition, about our aspirations and limitations,
Hmm.
about the forces that shape our lives often beyond our control.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Keef's life, in many ways, does have that tragic arc. He rose to fame at a young age, achieved incredible success, but also faced immense personal struggles and setbacks.
Exactly. And while it's important not to romanticize those struggles, it's clear that his story, as reflected in his music, it touches on some of those classic themes of tragedy, this idea of potential cut short, of battling against forces larger than yourself, of the fragility of success and fame. It's a story that has resonated with audiences for centuries.
Wow. This is really making me reevaluate how I think about Chief Keef. It's like we're peeling back the layers and finding all these unexpected connections to philosophy, to literature, to these big universal themes. It's amazing.
That's what's so cool about these deep dives. They force us to question our assumptions and make connections we never would have thought of on our own. But remember we talked about Chief Keef as like a kind of modern prophet in the last part. How does this idea of tragedy tie into that?
You know, that's a good question. If we think about prophets as figures who challenge the status quo, who speak truth to power even if that truth is uncomfortable, Chief Keef, through his music, is kind of doing that, isn't he?
I think so. He's not shying away from the realities of his environment, from the struggles that many face. He's putting it all out there, forcing us to confront it. And in doing so, he's sparking conversations, challenging our perceptions, maybe even prompting us to think about how we can create a better world.
He's making us uncomfortable, but in a good way. Like he's shaking us out of our complacency and saying, hey, pay attention. This is happening and we need to talk about it.
Absolutely. And that discomfort, that willingness to challenge the status quo, that's often a characteristic of prophets throughout history. It's about forcing us to see the world differently, to question our assumptions, and to work towards a more just and equitable future.
Man, this deep dive is heavy. It's amazing how much we can unpack from something that on the surface seems like just music.
It's a reminder that art can be a powerful tool for social commentary, for philosophical exploration, even for spiritual awakening. It all depends on how we choose to engage with it. But I think it's time we shift gears a bit. We've explored the big ideas, the philosophical and theological connections, but how do we make this practical? What can we actually take away from all of this and apply to our own lives?
That's a great question. I'm ready to bring this down to earth. and see how all this thinking can translate into action. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've gone so deep into Chief Keef's world, exploring his music through these lenses of liberation theology, existentialism, even comparing him to a modern-day prophet. But my brain is starting to hurt with all these big ideas. I'm ready for some practical takeaways. How do we apply this to our everyday lives?
I hear you. It's easy to get lost in the abstract, but what's great about this deep dive is that it's not just about like high-minded concepts. There's some real down-to-earth lessons we can learn from Chief Keef's story and art. For me, one of the biggest takeaways is the power of authenticity.
Authenticity. That's something that comes up again and again in the script, isn't it? The idea that Chief Keef is unapologetically himself, regardless of what others might think.
Exactly. He's not trying to fit into a mold or please everyone or present this polished image. He's expressing his reality, his perspective, his experiences, even the difficult ones, with a rawness that's both unsettling and compelling. And I think there's a powerful lesson in that for all of us.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in trying to be what we think others want us to be. We curate our online personas, we worry about fitting in. Sometimes we even silence our own voices because we're afraid of being judged.
Yeah.
Chief Keef's approach is almost the opposite of that.
It's almost radical, isn't it? This commitment to being true to yourself, even if it means being misunderstood or criticized. And I think that's where true strength and creativity come from that willingness to embrace who you are, flaws and all.
It's a reminder that it's okay to stand out, to be different, to express your unique perspective even if it goes against the grain. That's how you make a real impact. Another thing that really struck me about this deep dive was the emphasis on resilience. Chief Keef's story, his rise to fame despite immense challenges, it's a testament to the power of perseverance.
Absolutely. His life hasn't been easy. He's faced obstacles that would have crushed many others, but he kept going, kept creating, kept pushing forward. And that's a lesson that resonates with all of us. We all face setbacks, disappointments, moments where we want to give up.
But it's in those moments that resilience becomes crucial. It's about finding that inner strength, that grit and determination to keep going even when it's hard. And it's not just about surviving those tough times. It's about using them to grow, to learn, to become stronger.
It's about turning those challenges into opportunities for transformation, and that's a process that never really ends. Chief Keef's career, even with its ups and downs, is a testament to that. He's constantly evolving, experimenting, pushing boundaries. There's a real refusal to be stagnant or complacent.
Okay, so we've got authenticity and resilience. Any other practical nuggets of wisdom we can take away from this deep dive?
Well, throughout this entire process, we've been forced to question our own assumptions about music, about philosophy, about where we find meaning. And I think that's a really valuable lesson in itself, the importance of challenging our own perspectives.
Yeah, we came into this deep dive with certain expectations. I know I did. But those expectations were constantly being challenged, expanded, sometimes even turned upside down.
And that's a good thing. It's so easy to get stuck in our own ways of thinking, to assume that we know the answers. But real growth, real understanding comes from that willingness to question what we think we know,
Right.
to be open to new perspectives, to be willing to admit that we might be wrong.
It's about having intellectual humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. In fact, that's where the real learning begins. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of wonder. We started with a simple question: what's the deeper impact of Chief Keef? And we ended up exploring philosophy, theology, and even some really practical life lessons. It's incredible how much depth we can find when we look beyond the surface.
It's a reminder that meaning and inspiration can come from the most unexpected places. It's all about how we choose to look at the world. Chief Keef's story, his music, it challenges us to think differently, to be more open, to be more courageous in our own lives.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of Chief Keef. We hope you've gained some new insights, some fresh perspectives, and maybe even a little bit of inspiration along the way. Keep those brains buzzing, keep diving deep, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Deep Dive.